You think you've seen all the best horror films of 2020s? Think again. Today, I'm counting down 25 criminally underrated horror films that flew under the radar but absolutely deserve your attention. From icy wilderness thrillers to mind-bending body horror, there is something here for every kind of horror fan. Let's dive in. Stop motion. A disturbing blend of art and insanity, stop motion follows an animator whose puppets start taking on a life of their own, literally. With grim visuals and surreal descent into madness, this film blurs the line between creation and possession. Think Black Swan meets Mad God. Watcher. Minimalist but nerve-thrilling. Watcher follows a young woman who moves to Bucharest, Romania, and begins to suspect she is being watched by a mysterious man across the street. Is she paranoid, or is something really out there? With its slow building tension and eerie atmosphere, this is a Hitchcockian thriller for the modern age. Mad God, a nightmarish, dialogue-free plunge into a decaying world of flesh, machines, and madness. Directed by legendary visual effects artist Phil Tippett, Mad God is stop-motion horror like you have never seen before, disturbing, grotesque, and hypnotic. It's less a story and more an experience, like descending into a fever dream of God gone insane, not for everyone, but unforgettable for those who can stomach it. Host. Shot entirely on Zoom during the early days of the pandemic, Host proves you don't need a big budget to scare the hell out of people. It's tight, clever, and genuinely terrifying, clocking in under an hour but packing more scares than most full-length horrors. Hunter x Hunter. This one flew way too low under the radar. Set in the remote Canadian wilderness, Hunter x Hunter starts off like a survival drama but slowly morphs into something much darker and way more brutal than you expect. The slow burn pays off with one of the most shocking third acts in recent horror memory. Oddity. Fresh, bold, and genuinely creepy, Oddity is one of those rare indie horrors that feels like a nightmare you can't quite explain. With its surreal visuals and eerie pacing, this one gets under your skin and stays there, definitely one of 2024's sleeper hits. In the Earth. Ben Whitley's trippy eco-horror greatness, In the Earth blends folk horror, psychedelia, and pandemic paranoia into a surreal descent into madness. It's not your average jump scare flick, it's weird, it's cerebral, and it's beautifully disturbing. Censor. Set in the grimy world of 1980s British video nasties, Censor is a love letter to old-school horror with a psychological twist. As our protagonist spirals into paranoia, so do we. And by the end, you're not sure what's real and what's fantasy, a must-watch for retro horror fans. Resurrection. A successful woman's life is thrown into chaos when a man from her past resurfaces, reigniting old fears she thought were buried for good. Resurrection is a slow-burn psychological horror that explores control, obsession, and the kind of trauma that quietly corrodes from the inside, tense and definitely disturbing. Hatching. From Finland comes this grotesque and oddly touching body horror fairy tale. A young girl nurtures a mysterious egg, and what hatches is something truly terrifying. It's dark, it's weird, and it explores toxic family dynamics in the most bizarre way possible. Grafted. A recent release that deserves way more buzz, Grafted offers Cronenbergian body horror with a fresh twist. Think surgical nightmares, identity crisis, and flesh that doesn't behave like it's supposed to. If you love your horror twisted and squirmy, don't miss this. The Damned. A slow burn period horror with some real bite, The Damned isn't about fleshy scares, it's about oppressive atmosphere and psychological unease. Perfect for fans of The Witch or The Others, it creeps up on you and stays in your bones. Infested. Arachnophobes beware. Emerging from France, this spine-tingling creature feature spins a web of relentless tension and pure arachnophobic horror. Infested turns a crumbling apartment complex into a terrifying spider-infested death trap. It's gross, claustrophobic, and surprisingly smart. A creature feature with real stakes and real ick factor. Suitable flesh. Campy, sexy, and Lovecraftian. What more could you ask for? Suitable flesh blends body-swapping madness with pulpy, erotic horror in a way that feels like a throwback to 80s VHS horror, only slicker. Not for everyone, but horror weirdos will love it. A Wounded Fawn. Stylish and surreal, this one is all about the descent into madness, both visually and emotionally. With giallo influences and a feminist edge, A Wounded Fawn is a haunting look at violence, guilt, and psychological horror wrapped in art house flair. Birth Rebirth, a female-led modern take on the Frankenstein mythos, cold, clinical, and deeply unsettling. Birth Rebirth explores themes of motherhood, ethics, and obsession in a totally new light. It's horror with brains and guts literally. No One Will Save You, a mostly dialogue-free alien invasion movie that hits surprisingly hard. Catherine Dever gives a killer performance, and the blend of sci-fi and home invasion horror is super effective, tense, creative, and unexpectedly emotional. The Night House. Rebecca Hall absolutely carries this eerie, grief-soaked ghost story. The Night House plays with mirrors, shadows, and the concept of duality in such a smart, creepy way. It's not just scary, it's emotionally resonant and thematically rich. Cobweb. What if your childhood nightmares were actually real? Cobweb feels like a fairy tale gone rotten, moody, dark, and full of surprises. It got overlooked during its release, but it's definitely worth your time, especially if you like domestic horror with a twist. Azrael. Dark, brutal, and beautifully shot. Azrael doesn't pull any punches, it throws you into a violent, unforgiving world and dares you to look away. If you are into apocalyptic survival horror with a bit of mystery, this one is for you. Alone. Stripped down, nerve-wracking, and surprisingly emotional. Alone follows a woman on the run from a relentless pursuer through the wilderness. It's raw, grounded horror with real human stakes and some serious tension. Relic, one of the best horror metaphors for dementia in recent years. Relic is slow and subtle, but the emotional punch it delivers by the end is unforgettable. Think the Babadook, but more meditative and possibly even more heartbreaking. The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This Dracula story deserved way more love. Demeter is essentially alien on a boat, a confined, moody creature feature with great atmosphere and a strong lead performance. It's a horror period piece that deserved better box office. The West of Night. This lo-fi sci-fi gem isn't traditionally horror, but its creeping sense of unease earns the spot here. Set in 1950s New Mexico, it's a masterclass in atmosphere, dialogue, and slow burn suspense. The final 15 minutes are quite unforgettable. The Dark and the Wicked. And finally, our number one pick. The Dark and the Wicked is pure dread distilled into film. Directed by Brian Bertino, this is horror at its bleakest and most atmospheric. No cheap thrills, just raw existential terror, a masterclass in mood and pacing. So, how many of these have you actually seen? Let me know in the comments which underrated horror film you think deserves more love, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that creepy little bell icon for more horror deep dives. Until next time, stay scared.